have started to join us for this afternoon's Downtown Den session with Barry Kushner. Barry is the Cabinet Member for Liverpool City Council's Regeneration and Housing brief, and delighted to have you with us this afternoon, Barry, a Downtown Den virgin. First time with us. And I'll tell you what, that phrase hasn't been used about Barry for a long time, about anything, I don't think. But listen, just before we get into the detail of your brief and some exciting plans that I know you've got for Liverpool, for the city, tell us a bit about your background, mate, how you've sort of ended up where you are, and what path your sort of political career has followed thus far.
Okay, so I spent probably about the last sort of 30 odd years involved in regeneration, mainly in the not-for-profit sector, but in a whole range of different areas. So and a lot of it started with funding, but also to designing some programs. So I did a lot of work at the time with Northwest Vision, raised $1 million for them, and developed a business support program to develop the infrastructure in the film TV industry, for example. I've done quite a big lot around sort of business support, business development over the past. A lot of these were European funded, and I've also done lots in terms of development of buildings and programs, but linked mainly to in the not-for-profit sector in the Northwest. But and then obviously quite a lot of Liverpool, and I've worked for lots of organisations right across the city, so I've got a pretty I've got a good feel. I know a lot of the organisations across every sort of corner of the city, really. And I probably got into that because I've been working in Russia, in Moscow, for a publishing company. We're publishing business directories. This is going back to 1990. I came back in 1998, but I spent a few years doing different things over there, and came back and the day I was going to sign on, I ended up got a sort of a consultant job to go over to the Isle of Man and have a look at there was had issues with the children's home there, which is for Action for Children, and that I started from there, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So pardon?
How long you were in Russia for?
I spent 5 years living in various different bits of the former Soviet Union. So I spent a year in Kazakhstan. I travelled around Central Asia to write a guidebook for 3 months after that. And then I worked in Moscow for 3 years. Oh, for a year. And then I worked there for another 3 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I don't know. There you go. You learn something new every day. I didn't know that about you, Barry.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of your role at Liverpool City Council, then, what ward do you represent, Barry?
I represent Norris Green Ward. So I got elected in 2012, and it's been great, to be honest. I mean, I think Norris Green's one of those parts of the city that has been transformed as much as anywhere else in the city. I think we still got still issues there, obviously, particularly around hardship and poverty and things like that. But when I was elected, there was a fatal shooting 3 months into my term, and we had to make a real stand about that, pulling different parts of the council and other partners, housing associations and others together to really decide to effect some proper change in Norris Green, because at the time people just wanted to leave, and now you won't find that, and it's actually a really become, particularly the new developments, it's a really attractive place to be. So it's a great transformation. So I'm really proud of what we've been able to do in Norris Green.
And I know, Barry, from conversations we've had previously, and obviously watching your performance on the council, your big motivation really is to tackle some of the inequalities that exist within the city. We often talk about Liverpool's renaissance over the past decade or so, rightly so, because the city centre in particular has been transformed. You'd be the first to say that we need to do more for those deprived communities and those that perhaps haven't benefited as much from that city centre regeneration.
Yeah, and I think when I'm talking to people in our team, my thing is that if regeneration doesn't have an impact on people's jobs and health and prospects, then that's not regeneration. That's just building. So that's a really important principle for me. And I think that where we have done, we have done built some housing in different parts of the city, and that Norris Green's an example, Anfield, Speak, but bits in Picton. But I think what I would say is that it's not been done strategically on a neighbourhood basis, and I think that's where if I'm honest, I think that's where we've been lacking. I think that's where we need to improve. And obviously, there's been a focus on some of the big ticket regeneration programs, which we've also needed to do because we've got to create jobs and wealth in the city and business opportunities. So I think we need to keep that going, but we need to move towards that neighbourhood planning and regeneration.
Yeah, and funnily enough, our two sponsors today, Crossfield and Lango Raw, are involved in a number of schemes that obviously are delivering some of those key developments that you talk about. Lango Raw, not least, of course, the hospital, and they inherited a little bit of a mess from Carillion, but great to see they're making progress now. They're hoping to be on site at Bramley Moor in the not too distant future as well. And then Crossfield, I'm sure you know of their work in terms of social housing and other developments across the city. But the other thing, Barry, that we often talk about in Liverpool, and in fact in all cities, when it comes to regeneration schemes, development, construction, it is how we can benefit the indigenous companies, and whether or not Liverpool businesses, Liverpool people are getting the opportunities for those jobs and for that business that is being created. Again, I know that's something you're keen to see happen more of in the future, but nonetheless, I think it's fair to say that we have improved in that area over the past few years, haven't we?
Yeah, we have, and I think to coin a phrase, there's a lot more that we can do. I think we used to have more regular supplier events organised through the city just to make local suppliers in particular aware of what our plans are and how they and get prepared to how they could fit in with some of the programs that we have planned, and that's probably just as much the case if we're with our housing plans, and probably talk about that a bit later on. And obviously I would encourage, and we want local businesses and local jobs to benefit from what we're doing. And I think we can learn a bit from Manchester, not in terms of on the pitch, but certainly in terms of but in terms of their local procurement, local spend. And I think they're savvier than we are, I think, about that. And I think we need to up our game a bit in terms of ensuring that we build as much of the Liverpool pound as we can.
Yeah, and again, I know that you sing off the same hymn sheet as me as far as this is concerned. That's not to say that we don't want big investors from outside of the city to come in, because often it's that money that can then gear development and opportunities for others. But I think the point you're making there is where we've got the opportunity of supply chains, particularly, then we do want Liverpool companies to be in the mix when they're being selected.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're not. I don't think you would have to be parochial about that. These things have to go out to tender, and there's procurement processes and all of that. But the key for me is what we get out of that as a city, and we have to get out of that. And supply chain is key. And whoever wins contracts, and in the construction business, generally, these big companies they're basically managing agents of contracts, and a lot of the work is done by subcontractors and suppliers, and I think that's where we can have the that's where I'd like to see more businesses getting that opportunity, and the same with local jobs and apprenticeships. I've got just an example of that. While you mention it, we've got the government's new green homes scheme, which is a fiasco, has got, but there's a lot of money behind it. I mean, there's £2 billion the government have allocated to spend up until next March, and I think hopefully that they're going to extend that period. But to do that retrofitting for, you know, energy efficiency measures in houses, your external wall insulation, your boilers, and things like that, there's only 13 companies, installers registered in the city region for that. So, but the amount of work and the opportunity is huge. So we need to find a way to support all our local subcontractors and businesses, you know, to be able to take advantage of, you know, of that, because that's all work and business. It improves our local housing. You know, it's a win-win for everyone, that one.
Yeah. Now, let's just stick with the housing issue for a second, because even some Conservatives recently have been saying that one of the ways in which we can build our way back out of, you know, the COVID crisis is to begin to look at some of the issues and challenges around housing. And they're talking, Barry, not simply about lots of new houses, which are needed because we understand and appreciate housing waiting lists, lack of affordable homes, and so on. We're also modernising properties and bringing them up to the standards that you talk about there in terms of the green agenda. So in terms of Liverpool's housing strategy, what are the sort of plans, what are your hopes and aspirations moving forward?
Okay, so I think that we've got 65% of the housing in our city was built pre-1944, and 35% of it was built before 1919, before the, you know, the Addison Act, the Housing Act in 1919. So we've got a lot of old properties, and we've got 17,000 of them that we categorise as hazardous. And then we've got an awful lot more than that, going up to 60, 70,000 that just, you know, that are leaking energy, and, you know, and contributing to, you know, the significant fuel poverty that we have in the city. So we have to address that.
Yeah.
I think, as well as building the new houses. I mean, but you're talking. Well, I think one of the things that, just looking at what we can do as a council, and I've been talking to some of the housing associations about this, is that we need to, and Homes England, we need to build up a pot of money between us, where we can say, well, you know, there's a street in Kensington, for example, we should buy the whole street. You know, there's the streets off Smithdown Road, opposite Archbishop Blanche. You know, we need to buy that whole block one way or another, and do something, you know, properly with it, you know, to the benefit of the people who live in there. You know, we've got, where we can use money that the government are allocating for retrofit, we've got to make sure that we use that as well. So we've got, we're going to have probably something like £3.6 million for retrofitting houses, their energy efficiency measures. So that's around 350 houses that we can support for that. So we've got to do that. We've got to do that, and we're going to deliver that before the end of September. And we have to make sure we maximise that. So I think it's a combination of those different measures. But, you know, but the bottom line is, we're talking hundreds of millions of pounds to be able to do it. And we'll do what we can as a council with any of our partners, because we can't do any of this on our own. But the government have got to provide the money for it through Homes England and grant and loan, so that we can make it happen. And we all together need to be lobbying government to make sure that they make that available.
Yeah, and people often think, you know, well, we're just putting the country into debt. But, you know, what we understand is that, you know, governments can borrow over a 100-year period. And we are in a situation of crisis now. You could compare it to a war, a world war. And therefore, if you look at the amount of cash that we borrowed following the Second World War, then actually Rishi Sunak's got a long way to go. And I say that in all seriousness. You know, we put a manifesto together back in the summer, and we were talking about, you know, trillions being invested into the economy, not billions. And when you look at what Joe Biden has announced in the States, for example, you know, that's the sort of action plan, that's the sort of boost that the economy needs. And given the amount of infrastructure deprivation that there is in this country, whether it be transport, whether it be housing, then there's certainly no shortage of schemes and projects to invest that money into. And I call it investment, Barry. I don't call it borrowing or loans, because it's
Absolutely.
our country's development and future. And just sticking with the housing thing for a second, we have, I think, in this country gone down the road, rightly or wrongly, where owner occupation is seen as the priority and what many people aspire to. And so that shared ownership model, which has started to emerge in recent years, makes it a bit more affordable for people, allows younger people to get onto the housing ladder, so they should they so choose. That's something, those mixed tenures, something that will be very much part of your thinking as we move forward on the housing agenda, Barry?
Absolutely. And I think we need to we need to we need to start building council houses again as a city. For first time in 30 years, we have to do that. But everything's got to be a mixed tenure, what we do, and I think we have to give, and we should give people the opportunity to get on the ladder as well by rent to buy, shared ownership. One of the plans we've got is a People's Bank, a mutual, that developing with Preston and Wirral councils, that will do just that. We can align that to the housing developments that we're doing, or anyone that's doing housing in the city, that we could support people to provide deposits, or to part own the house initially as they sort of build their equity in the house as they go forward. Absolutely. I think we have to, it's not a one trick pony. We have to provide and meet what the housing needs are for the people in the city.
Yeah.
I'll just come back to you on one thing just before you ask that question, the other question. Yeah. You asked me how I came into politics. And I wrote a book with my brother called Who Needs the Cuts? And it was it was published in 2014. And it came out of work that we were doing for 3 or 4 years based on response to the austerity program that the government brought in then, for exactly what you're talking about. So we, in 1946, our debt as a ratio of our national income was 238%. If that was going to be the case today, then our debt would be around £2.5 trillion, and it's about 2.6, 2.8 trillion pounds, and it's about 1.2, 1.3. So you're absolutely right. The room. This is a crisis that we're coming out of, and we can't. For me, it's not good enough for us to decide to come out of this crisis, the pandemic, with all the flaws in our country that's exposed, to go back to the way it was before. We have to come out of it with something that takes people, that addresses those issues and provides a platform going forward. And that's got to come from government investment. And it sounds a lot of money, 50 billion for the furlough scheme, but that's less than 2-3% of our national income. It's nothing that compared to what we can afford. We need real substantial investment, and it doesn't cost the country much, because a lot of it can be done through quantitative easing through the Bank of England. So it's free money basically.
Yeah. I don't think anyone can look back at the years of austerity now and think that was a successful experiment.
I know. What have we got to show for that?
Yeah, ultimately, at the time, it was, I think it was a legitimate argument that you could put forward, but I think the consequences and the results proved that it was wrong. And again, if you look at what they did by comparison in the States, where they did invest in infrastructure following the financial crash, and they did try and support business in a very sort of aggressive and proactive way, then their economy fared better. And again, I don't know this for sure, because I've not asked him the question directly. I might get to later this year. But I'm not convinced George Osborne would be putting up a fantastic case for that austerity programme either during those 10 years in the end, wasn't it? No, I think we're on the same page with that. And the other thing around this area, which I think is quite interesting, because we've been involved in a number of business surveys over the past few months. And, what business owners are saying is one of the key priorities moving forward is the fairness agenda. Now, that might surprise some people outside of the business world, Barry, because they think every entrepreneur is just, red-blooded and all they want to do is make money. I can assure you that that's not the case. It's certainly not the case with downtown members. And we like putting back into the communities where we work. But I think, there has been a chord struck over the last 9 months where people have recognised, this pandemic's been bad for everybody. But those people in those most deprived areas, those people who are in blue collar jobs on the front line, beyond the health service, I'm thinking bus drivers, I'm thinking people who work on the bins, I'm thinking railway drivers, all those people who we just assume, well, you've just got to get on. You've just got to go to work, whether you like it or not. We're sat at home often doing working from home. I think those divides have been highlighted. And I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable. And so the opportunity for public-private sector partnerships with some leverage from the government has never been greater, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I think that for me, businesses, I mean, so Richie Sunak was talking about, when he talked about the furlough schemes and loans, he kept referring to viable businesses. But how do you know what business is viable when your customer base has been cut off at the knees during a pandemic? All you can say is that those businesses were trading, and what they've got now, experiencing now, is a massive cash flow problem. So we need to, I think the government needs to fill that cash flow void, and the furlough obviously helps with that. But there's more than that. There's rents and all that the businesses have got to provide, and all other agreements they've got with what they're doing, supply chains and all that. And I think that they need to maintain that cash flow so those businesses, when we start opening up, can come back. And I think that's a big mistake that the government are making. I think and I think in terms of employment, in terms of wage, salaries and conditions, I think that the more people are paid, the more money people have got to spend, and locally. And I think it does come back, So I would always encourage that. I'm not someone who would sort of naming and shaming organisations. I don't think that's right. And businesses are in different financial situations, and are working towards solutions. But we should name and claim those that do. I think that they're paying the proper national minimum wage, not the government one. That and that on decent terms and conditions, and ending 0 hours contracts and things like that. Just that will encourage that. That helps the local economy move to all of our benefit, I think. So I would support that, definitely.
Yeah. So Barry, the other side of your brief, housing, clearly a crucial issue in the city for all the that we've spoken about. And if you're thinking about why people live in poverty, or why people find it difficult to get out of poverty, then actually living in poor housing has got to be one of the top three for sure. But regeneration, which obviously includes that housing piece, but we've seen some fabulous projects over the last decade or so prop up in Liverpool, and go back to the city centre, obviously, the Arena and Conference Centre, Liverpool One. The Knowledge Quarter is developing superbly well now. Colin Sinclair and his team up there doing a great job. Big investments secured through L&G and Bruntwood, of course. But then some other things as well that we're looking forward to. Not least from my perspective, mentioned it earlier, the Everton Football Club Stadium, but seriously, the catalyst that will act for in terms of other things that can happen. So what are the sort of things that are exciting you, Barry, the sort of things that you're looking ahead and thinking, we're in a good place, despite the pandemic, Liverpool is still in a good place?
Well, Bramley Moor is, that's iconic, isn't it? It's going to be an iconic project, and it's going to do so much for that sort of north end of the city, and it will have two impacts. I think one, definitely on all the sort of the 10 streets that are, from sort of moving up from Costco up towards Bramley Moor, and what happens there. I think it's got to have, a significant impact. There's going to be in terms of, residential accommodation, office accommodation, retail, hotels, I mean, I think that just will have a significant impact. And the other one is the impact it'll have on Goodison and the legacy project. And I've been speaking to Everton, and Martin Carey's leading that for Everton at the minute, and about what that will do in terms of for around County Road and all around that area, and Goodison itself, with learning and housing and dementia projects. That's all sorts of different things they're talking about. I think you're going to be a really good. I'm really excited about that. I think the Festival Gardens project, massive development, and that's a real opportunity to do something that many cities don't have the opportunity of doing. Sort of proper, real sort of green agenda. Proper housing. In a garden environment by the river, I think is a fantastic opportunity with like really good leisure offer next to it, and we're gonna see test the market for something like that. I think it's great. I've got particular interest in the fabric district, and I think that it shouldn't just be a name. It's got to be what it is, and keep it what it is. It's in fact, my granddad, before his clothing factory was bombed during the war, had a factory there, I believe. I don't know where it was, but I believe in it. But all that, the Abercan and all the El Kilo, and there's some old hatters company there, all those that have been there for years. Got to keep it. But I think that can also be a great creative hub in the city as well. And we need to make sure whatever happens with TJ Hughes building is one that fits in that area too. And that'll be, that should be an area that will be bustling, with people working and living there, with bars and cafes. And so I'm really sort of excited with a creative element in there with creators. So I'm really excited about that. And then the other thing for me is we've started in Picton is, what can we do if we bring all the resources of the council's got at its disposal, and bring it to focus on an area. What can we actually do? And we're doing that in Picton at the moment. And it's housing, it's some of the retail stuff, it's some of the highways and parking issues. There's stuff about what we do about bins, where they're going underground, all that. But all that is transformational for an area, and that, if we pull it off and we do it right, as a model that we can roll out in other parts of the city. And that includes some big retail. There's the Taskers development there that we need to think about what we do. So it's those things are really, they make me tick. I'm really excited about all of that.
Yeah. And both problem this for the city centre, but also for some of the neighbourhoods now, of course, is the hit that retail has taken. And so, wherever you drive, I drive home via Park Road, for example, and I've noticed all the shutters going up on the shops increasingly over the last months or so. I hope some of those retailers return, but I'm not sure they will. And again, Barry, that's something, it's a new challenge now, isn't it, that we have to start to adapt to. You go down Church Street, we've lost some big units. So Debenhams, Topshop, Topman, Next is moving out of one unit and into another, but they're downsizing. They the sort of things that we're beginning to start to have conversations about, or is it too soon yet?
I think we're starting to have those conversations. It's a bit kind of, we don't know quite how damaging this has been to the retail sector, and it's suffering from those sort of the cash flow thing I was talking to you about. The spend that you get because people are just walking around a shop. You walk in a shop, you buy things you don't necessarily intend to buy, just you're walking in there. And I think that, so we don't know how much of that is going to be a major structural change, and then we need to think about what we do about that. And maybe we don't own a lot of these units, and the business rates are phenomenal and expensive, and the rents can be expensive, and some of these things I think we need to have a plan with just identify what those issues are. Some of that the government's are going to have to have a think about and how they're going to address some of those things because they're national government decisions, and then come up with some ideas about what we might do with those buildings instead. I mean, if they're no longer, and I'm not sure whether that's the case, but if they're no longer going to be have a retail function, what can we do with them?
Yeah.
Is there a something leisure we can do there? Is there a mix with, but obviously there's maybe some office accommodation, but it's also some residential accommodation. So I think we have to think about what the needs are of the city, because what we don't want is a city centre full of voids. That will kill it. So I think we need to think more flexibly about what we do with those spaces going forward, and we don't know the answers to that, but we need to be thinking about it. Together, by the way, together.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion and debate. I mean, I'm one of those people that is always optimistic about cities. I think cities and city centres are the lifeblood of any economy. It's where people congregate, it's where talent develops, it's where creativity happens. And so I'm confident that the cities will bounce back. But I do think it's going to be different. And I think, therefore, we can have some interesting conversations and discussions. But you look at the Met Quarter, which was written off 10 years ago. Liverpool emerged, everyone said, oh, that Met Quarter, what a shame, it's never going to take off. And you look at some of the things that are happening there now, because those guys have started to think a little bit differently. How can we change? How can we evolve? How can we meet the needs of people and add value to what the offer is from the Liverpool One piece, for example? So it can be done, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, LMA, you've moved in on the first floor there, and that's a completely repurposed use of it, and it works, doesn't it? And you can have, you can have educational, health facilities in some of these centres. Why not? Sports facility. I mean, there's no reason why we can't do that. I think it's we just need to think what people who have probably got used to not working from home might live in the city centre somewhere, but might need somewhere to come to work. Sort of workstations, work bases, and things like that. So I think there's a whole number of different things that we need to think creatively and imaginatively about, and and I think that might be a change going forward. I hope the retail is still going to be strong enough. I agree with you, but we should have all these other options as well ready, and we should be considering them now.
And Barry, just in terms of, just go back to those big regeneration projects that we're looking at, as well as those that you've mentioned. The cruise liner terminal seems to have been on the agenda for an age. I think we're still progressing with that, if my memory serves me right. Again, the travel industry at the moment is in massive flux, and nobody's able to book a cruise even if you want to at the moment. But is that something that we're still keen on as a city to progress?
Yeah, I mean, there's hardly any cities in the world, are there, where you dock on a cruise and you walk straight into the heart of it. I mean, the money that people are bringing into the city, and for businesses in the city, is fantastic. We can't let that go.
It's
so
too good.
it is. It's too good. It's too good. Too much work and thought gone into it, and and even the terminal that we've had now is proven what impact it can have, and with our own proper terminal where you can disembark and embark, and just shows the potential. We could just increase that, what we've seen already, phenomenally, and that's just can only benefit the city.
And Barry, just final thing, perhaps, in terms of our infrastructure, and again, this is something that you'll be very well aware of, like anyone else who's spent too much time looking at the screen over the past 9 months. But we've heard this new term emerge, digital poverty, which is obviously an awful lot of that is focused around kids who've not been able to get proper education over the past 9 months because they've not got access to laptops and so on. But just in terms of economic efficiency, we need our digital infrastructure to be right. And again, if the governments are looking to invest in things that are going to take the country forward and going to actually, as I say, boost the economy, they could do a lot worse than look at that, couldn't they?
Yeah, and I think that's something obviously we need to the super fast broadband connections and things we need to look at. Or that super fast highway is something we need. Obviously there is a combined authority project, and we need to play our part in that, definitely. Because particularly if you're a business, you need to have that immediate, reliable 24/7 connection, and I think that's really, really important with wide bands for streaming and things like that. It's fundamental. And then on the other hand, we need to make sure that everybody in our city has got access to the internet, so that they can also use the media as well, and not for learning, for connecting, for shopping, for different reasons. So I think we need to see a push, and I'd like to see more of a push out to particularly on the neighbourhoods on the edge of the city, so that there's free broadband connection somewhere, however we can do that through, or facilitate that through our partnerships with BT and others, but also the city centre as well, obviously, with that super fast broadband, that super fast highways is absolutely critical in the modern age. Otherwise we'll fall quickly behind.
Barry, you mentioned briefly there the combined authority, and obviously they have a role to play in some of those bigger strategic infrastructure projects. So Frank Rogers was telling us last week about negotiations continuing in terms of HS2 links and some of the other transport connectivity projects that we're looking to undertake moving forward. I just wonder where we are as far as the devolution piece is concerned. Again, we criticised George Osborne earlier for his austerity policy. I thought one of the things that he did get right up to a point was at least the opportunity for devolution, combined authorities, mayors, and so on. And of course, we're in a bit of a unique situation in this part of the world because I always say we've got more mayors than cathedrals now, because we have the Lord Mayor, I know it's a civic role, then we've got the City Mayor, and then we've got obviously Steve Rodham and the City Region Mayor. I think we're committed, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, to having a consultation in a couple of years about the City Mayor. Just be interesting to get your take on where you think that whole discussion and debate is going.
Okay, so I think I think what we agreed locally as a party and through council now is that there'll be a referendum on the governing model for the city in 2023. So it'll be when we vote in 2023, people can also have a vote on whether they want a leader and cabinet model, or a mayoral model, or a cabinet or a committee structure, and there'll be a consultation and building up to that, so that people are clear what each of those models represent. I think it's right. I think we've been criticised because we didn't hold a referendum before we brought in the mayoralty in 2012, but I think that I think there were good reasons for it. I think because of the city deal and things like that. But I think at some point, 10 years on, it's right to to ask people in the city, how's that working for you, and make the case. I would argue for a mayoral model. Personally, I think it gets us on the top tables with other mayors, not just in the UK but internationally. International people and other cities and countries understand mayors rather than leaders. I think so. I think that helps with trying to bring in investment. Invitations to various different cities and events, and to promote our city and investment opportunities and exporting opportunities as well. And also, I think it gives a slightly different profile in our relationship with contact with government. It doesn't always work out in our favour, but it does get us there. So I think that the benefit of the mayor in terms of a mayoral model, raising the profile of the city and as a focal point for within the city as well, for pushing clearly by clarifying what our priorities are, bringing people around those priorities together, pushing forward with all that profile outside the city, I think is good for the mayoral model. There are political risks in it. You can lose. As a Labour Party member, you could lose control of the council overnight, Whereas with a different model, it takes years because of this. We have you've got to win the majority of seats. So but I think as a model for the city, I think it's a good one.
I'm looking forward to that debate over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Well, it'd be interesting to see how interested people are in having it as well. But it's good. We should have it. I think it'd be good to see.
I think it's an interesting one because businesses are very aware of the model in place, because you just have to be if you're involved in sort of engagement with the city council and so on. I think, I talk on behalf of downtown and business members rather than the wider business community, I suppose. But many of our members have found the usefulness of having a single point of contact as a mayor and someone who's a figurehead, championing the city and the city's needs. So I'm at this stage, at least, Barry, I'm with you. A week's a long time in politics, though. We'll see where we are in a couple of years' time. But at this moment in time, I'd certainly be arguing to retain the mayoral model. Listen, last question from me before I bring our sponsors in to ask a couple of questions of you. And it goes back to this bigger picture, really, in terms of where our city fits into UK PLC. Because again, I know you said that tongue in cheek, we've not always seen eye to eye with the government. And I think, we have a history, don't we, as a city, as Scousers, that we can roll up governments the wrong way. And that's of all colours, by the way. They don't necessarily just have to be blue. But it's important that we get investment. It's important that we do have a constructive relationship with the government, whichever colour it is, particularly at this point in time. And so again, Barry, I know that you and your colleagues have been really keen to produce evidence-based recovery plans where we can actually demonstrate to Boris Johnson and his colleagues, look, if you give us this money, there will be a return on that investment in the end.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we've got, the main project that we've got from the government is the Edge Lane Film Studios. And that's a £15 million investment towards probably a 40, £50 million project. But that will bring, international film production companies and distributors into our city with productions and post-production, with all the and all the added-on benefits of catering and hotel accommodation and all training, local jobs that should go with it. So it just shows what the potential of that for the local economy, and in raising. It also sort of raises the profile of the city, doesn't it? It makes it continues to make it attractive, which it should, which it is. So I think, those sort of national sort of big picture things, I think, are really really important. And the elephant in the room here is that we're a council under scrutiny at the moment, questioning how developments have taken place, and I don't want anyone in the city to get the impression that means that anyone from Liverpool who wants to develop something with us is going to be cast under suspicion, because that's not the case. We want to, there's some great businesses and developers in this city, and we need you. We need you, and we need the businesses to help take the city forward. It was the case 10 years ago, more. It's the same now, and we need to just build the confidence in that. But we need to something that we need to do together. It's really important.
Ari, thanks for being candid, as I expected you to be, with your answers this afternoon. As I say, we're going to bring a couple of people in now. Is Tom Higgins? Can we bring Tom in first, please? And then Lucy, if you can get ready to put your question, and then Sean from Sutcliffe, Sean Keys. So Tom's coming onto the screen now. You need to take yourself off mute. You'll be pleased to know this, Barry. Tom's a United supporter.
Oh.
But don't hold that against him, because he's driving forward the new Everton Stadium plans.
All right. Is that Sheffield United or?
And I'm sure he was delighted on Saturday night when the score with that last kick of the game. Tom, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Frank. Yeah, can you hear me?
Hey, we can, yeah. Do you want to put your question to Barry?
Yeah. Hi, Barry. I just building on the response that you gave to Frank, actually, last question. The impact of the pandemic and necessary lockdowns are well documented, and and the impact of both national and regional economies. As we start to come out of the lockdown for the vaccination programme, the economies are starting to open up, and there's going to be increased competition to secure available investment, both public and private. So 2 parts really. Firstly, what is the council doing to attract and secure investment? And secondly, what do you believe are Liverpool's USPs and differentiators that enable the council to secure their fair share of the investment?
Okay, I don't know that well, but I think it's what we're doing to say what to secure public. Sorry, go on, Frank. You're on mute now.
Christ.
Yeah.
First part of the question, I think, wrapping this up is Tom's asking what we're doing as a city to attract investment. I think he's probably picked up on your last comment there that you've made as well. The city is under a bit of scrutiny at the moment. And, we do need to ensure that our reputation stays intact through that particular process. And then what are the differentiators that Liverpool can offer potential investors moving ahead? Because again, we're well aware coming out of the crisis, we're going to be in competition, aren't we? We've got to sharpen our elbows because there are many other competitor cities across the world, never mind just in the UK, who are going to be looking for those investments.
Okay. I think we need to. The reality is that we're going to have to do a reset in terms of our, I think, relationship with investors, potential investors, into the city, and I think, to build confidence, but also to, where investors don't feel that either it's risky to come into the city or that we don't want them if they're in the city. And I think that we need to do that through a proper developers forum, an investors forum, I would say. And I think, and promoting, all the sort of things that the city's got to offer. Brexit, I didn't vote for Brexit. I'm happy that it's happened, but it has. But there are opportunities from as a Western-based city with what trade opportunities that might offer and what the port might offer as well. So I think we've got to be on top of that. But I think the main one for me is how we have to reach out to investors locally and outside the city about what we want to, what our ambitions are and what the plans are for the development of the city. And we know, that Bramley Moor's going to happen. I'm looking forward to it as well, but we'll need, what are the opportunities then for all the other, the 10 streets building up to it, for example, and things like that. So I think we have to open that up. I think in competitions with other places, we have mayoral development zones, and I think we need to use them to good effect. And even if that's an element of business rate relief initially to encourage businesses, but to properly come and stay here. But also I think the people, but it's got to be, people are attracted by momentum. In terms of a sort of a city with a dynamic and a feel and excitement and enthusiasm in it, and I think we have to generate that too. But I think there are good business opportunities in the city. We've got and we need to listen to you as well about what we haven't got as good grade A office accommodation that we would need to attract major businesses into. We need to have the housing that people want to live in if they're going to work in those jobs in the city. And so I think we need to distinguish it, in that way, and its access in and out of the city.
Thanks. No, I think that covers it. Just let me bring Tom in again. Tom, listen, you work for one of the most successful property companies in the world, never mind just in the UK, in terms of Lango Rourke. What are the sort of things that you know, attract you to Liverpool? Because, you know, you guys have done some great things in our city.
We have. We've been involved in the city for decades now, probably, and worked on some of the most iconic things. And why do we keep coming back to Liverpool? We keep coming back to Liverpool because the workforce, the workforce, some great local companies. On most of our schemes, we try to ensure that at least 40 to 45% of the workforce is from the local area.
Mm.
You know, we massively invest in both SMEs and opportunities to local companies. And for us, that's very, very important. And we want to leave a positive legacy on every scheme that we build. And going back to Barry's point, you know, put a building in place, that's not regeneration.
Mm.
It's what we do around the building and what we do when we leave that makes the whole project a success. And we do that because we want to do it, not because we're told to do it.
Mm.
And we want people to say, Langer Oak, do you know what? They're not bad guys.
Mm.
Yeah, they delivered that. But in doing that, they gave us training opportunities to create jobs, you know, they help local schools, you know, and that's what we do. And that's why we keep coming back, Frank, because there's opportunities there. And we want to see to create that positive impact.
Thanks.
And I think, yeah, and I think that's part of the reset, isn't it? I think it's, yeah, we need to understand that and what because not just us have got ideas, there will be investors with ideas about what they would like to do in the city. We need to hear that and work and help them develop, and what are the things that are attractive, where are the barriers, what are the other issues. And I think we need to have that. The reset is all of that in that sort of conversation. Cheers.
Lucy, can we bring Lucy in now? Heather, please. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for your question and your comments. And Lucy O'Connor from Crossfield, our other sponsor this afternoon, of course. I'm sure you're aware of some of the great work that Crossfield do, Barry, anyway. But Lucy, do you want to put your question? Nice to see you.
Hey, Barry. Hi, nice to see you all too. It's been really interesting, actually, and Tom actually sort of touched on a few things I was going to mention. We're a local construction company. We've got 65 local Liverpool employees as well with us now. And as you touched on at the beginning, you know, a key part of what we do is local jobs. We're working with a lot of apprentices in the city. We're doing a lot on training young people. We kind of really want to get the next generation now into our industry. More than ever at this minute, actually, because I think young people are in one of the hardest times they'll face. However, I feel there's a slight disconnect between public and private sector on this, especially for us as a private sector company. But we are delivering for some local authorities. But I would like to know how we can work closer with the local authority that we all work in and we live in, on how to have, and by working more closely with you, we'll have greater output. So the things that we're doing, young people and training and employment, I'd like to work closer with the public sector to basically have greater output. So I want to ask you how we can best do that and how we can best collaborate public and private sector better within the city.
Lucy.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. I think, well, obviously what I was talking about there, that sort of developers forum, and it should be on a regular thing, because it's about building relationships. I think are really important in terms of getting good collaboration and good understanding of what the needs of the city are. Not everyone will win the contract they want necessarily, but there's got to be a relationship and there's got to be a feel that's ongoing opportunities as we move forward. I think personally, I've been saying this for years, that I think that we have training, and it's partly how training is funded. We have training organisations and colleges whose primary function actually is to fulfil the requirements of their training contract. So regardless of what they say when they apply for the funding or the contract that they've got, they'll end up making sure that they get the learners in to fulfill what their requirements are. And there's no requirement to deliver any specific qualification. Actually, they just need to do what they think young people or other people want to do. But what that means is that there is that disconnect between people who are coming into the job market and people who are looking for people to come into the job market. And I think that training's got to be much better connected than it is now. The combined authority will talk about its growth sectors in digital media, for example, or the health sector, or travel and tourism, hospitality. But if you look at the qualifications that are actually being delivered in this city still, and the city region, they are hair and beauty, they are basic hands-on craft construction skills, they are basic introductory IT skills. And we need, I mentioned the film studios before. If we want our people to be able to work in that studio, they've got to have the skills to be able to do it. And so the training's got to support specific towards that. So it's got to be much more employer facing and working with employees where those opportunities are, like the things that you're doing, some of the construction stuff, or the hotel. There's a hotel, Novotel, are going to open their hotel in Paddington Village, which is right on the border with Picton. You're one of the poorest areas in the city, with low levels of qualification and all of that. But we need to make sure that people get the training now, so they can take those jobs when they come available next year. And we could see that in lots of other developments across the city. It's got to be they've got to be linked and planned towards those developments. So if that's what you're getting at, I think that we need to bring those training organisations together and have that conversation with the combined authority to make sure that they're doing proper training, that they've got to give people a proper chance.
Exactly. And I think we do it and we want to do it. Sometimes I think, are we delivering to the aspirations of what the council's doing? And when I hear people from the council talk, I'm thinking, we're doing that, but we need to work more closely, because forget winning the contracts or whatever. We want to get people into our industry.
And the challenge I've put to our team is, if we're so let's take, I don't know, festival gardens. If we're going to develop festival gardens, it's not enough for me just to see that we've got various targets for the number of local people that would get certain jobs. What's the plan to make that happen? What training agencies do we need to bring in to train young people to get the skills for these opportunities that we know are there? Working with people that's what we need to do. So it's not enough just to set a target. We've got to have a plan and make sure it's implemented.
And it's got to be sustainable as well, haven't they? These got to be
absolutely
jobs, not just jobs for like a project and then off you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Lucy. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And just one final question from Sean Keys from Sutcliffe. Heather, can we bring Sean in? Sean's not usually shy in coming onto a call, I have to say. And again, Barry, you'll be aware Sutcliffe have been around for many, many years now, one of our big success stories in the city. Sean, if you can take yourself off mute.
I mean, excellent. I'll fire on because I know time's flying on. On this crazy period that we've been living on, some businesses have been functioning reasonably well. So a couple of the construction companies that we have, so we're working with Crossfields, we did the LMA, we're working on Langs at the Royal. So there's a lot of business that I've done. They haven't been bouncing, but they've been doing okay. And then there's the other side of the business, anything to do with hospitality, have been absolutely hammered. But the question is that there's definitely going to be a bounce, 100% a bounce. Whether the ball bounces high enough is another matter. The question is, what can Liverpool City Council and Liverpool businesses and business people and people in the city do to give those businesses that have been impacted the most the best chance of coming back?
Thanks, Sean. Any friends on, Barry?
Do you know what I mean? I could turn around and say, we need to invest in them. We need to promote them and all that. But we haven't got. We need the money to invest in those businesses. I mean, and I think the government have got to stump that up. Really, I mean, we've put some money together to support that sort of cash flowing and the bounce thing. I think we've got to. So I think for us, it's about safe shopping and safe trading is going to be a key thing for people for a long time, isn't it? And I think that what we can do is make sure that people feel comfortable and safe going out and shopping. I think that is definitely something, and in the retail and hospitality sector we should do. We need to be, I think we probably need to have a proper visitor promotional campaign. I'm thinking off the top of my head now, Sean, but you know, that reminds people what Liverpool's got to offer. What can people enjoy coming here to do, whether they want to go to the theatre or see a concert in the arena, or they want to come shopping to go shopping, or you know, they want to come relax in the city. So I think there's something that we need to probably do, you know, around that to help with it, with the bounce. And then I think there is support that there is around some areas of employment, like the Kickstart program for people coming in to the job market, that we could probably focus and target to support businesses taking young people on with some subsidised wages. So I think we could probably help with things like that, and obviously training. But I think and I think then we need to be lobbying government to make sure that that no businesses go under for the simple fact that they didn't have the cash flow because people weren't trading over a very, very difficult period through no fault of their own, that the government really need to provide that support for. So I think it's probably a combination of those things. Do you think, Sean, do you think there's other things I've missed out there?
No, I think what Frank said in his earlier part, the businesses are out there and they understand what's going on. They really understand that there's trouble and strife that people are feeling. We're looking at the Kickstart program. I think Langs and Crossfield have both said the same, that we're actually taking on apprentices. It's really difficult to take apprentices on, like, you can't get them to do anything because there's nothing for them. They need training before they can do anything. Yeah. So we're looking at that Kickstart program. That's a great idea. And I think the other thing is, I'd say that we need to also have one eye on that. We might have lost a huge chunk of the economy, but there's still part of the chunk of an economy that's working. So we need to sort of get behind that, and the construction's one of those, and make sure that carries on working, because we will be feeding the bars, the restaurants, those other things, but we want them to happen. So I'd actually add to that and say, the businesses that have been doing okay, we need to come back and spend some money. We need to open our wallets and then continue do what the government to do, but we need to spend as well.
And Frank mentioned about sort of public investment, and we can do that. We have a proposal to open up a mutual regional bank together with Preston and Wirral local authorities, and maybe together with Lancashire, and that can provide a mutual but locally based infrastructure investment. And we need to start that. That's ready to go. We've got a housing capital programme which worth, in total would be worth around 350 million, but there's 50 million pounds of our own investment in there through borrowing, with 20 other million initially that we're getting from grant from Homes England one way or another. And we need to do that infrastructure and public sector investment that we can do, which helps move things forward. And something I mentioned before about the taking advantage of schemes like the new green homes. And we've got a network of business support agencies across the city region, and they should be focusing on supporting the subcontractors who could be registered as installers for those programs, because that's just completely open in terms of earning capacity to what they can physically do, and we should support them and open those markets up for them, make it aware of it. So I think there's a combination of those other things as well.
Yeah, just on that one, I think probably then just putting that out there again to let these people who maybe have fallen. I spoke to somebody this morning who's in the hospitality, who's not working in the hospitality, so letting some of these other people that these opportunities to pursue. So pointing them, put arrows and pointing them in the direction. Yeah. So as you say, the new green homes is a great one. Barry, is another great one. Let's get as much of that money from the government and let's spend it on Merseyside.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much for all your comments, questions, Barry. Thanks very much for as I say, very candid and full comprehensive contribution this afternoon. And just a couple of things to pick up on there, which probably more at a national level than a Liverpool level, but nevertheless very relevant to what we're going to be doing here. There's a budget coming up on the 3rd of March. We're putting a white paper together at the moment that's going to go into the Treasury for consideration. And some of the things we're saying, I think Rishi Sunak initially did a good job actually, but I think he came up with a 3-month business support package, and we're nearly 12 months into the crisis, and it's not really changed much. So we need him to be having a word strong word with the banks again, because our experience through our members is the banks have reverted to the computer says no mechanism again, and that needs to change, because there is still an awful lot of money in the system, and the banks, which were, let's face it, significantly subsidised post 2008, to be opening up a bit more, I think, and supporting businesses. If businesses are prepared to take a chance on themselves, then there's no reason why banks shouldn't take a chance on them. And I think the other thing I'd say, particularly around the hospitality piece, is we do need to start thinking of a smarter way in which we can get that sector back up and running safely, to protect the staff as much as to protect the customers. And so again, we're doing some work with the Tony Blair Institute. I know Tony Blair's not necessarily the flavour of the month with everybody, but his institute has done some fabulous work actually around the health challenges that we face. And we're looking at health passports. So whether that be somebody who's had a test, similarly to what we've done to get people into the Liverpool Awards event pre-Christmas, have a test, a mandatory test. That gets you access to venues, and certainly for the bigger events, I think we're going to need that moving forward. And then again, vaccinations. If you've had the vaccination, then surely there's got to be some benefit to that. There's just got to be a common sense approach to say, look, if you're vaccinated, you can get out and about. Yeah.
And I think that'll be ongoing. I think next year, if there are different strains like there is with the flu jab, there may well be people may need to have another COVID jab. So I think it's an ongoing thing, and we've got to make sure that we can protect people's public health, so that we can help the economy. I think that's really important. The other thing last thing I was going to say with you, I agree. Banks since 2008 have not gone back to proper their loans and investment in businesses, their business investment. It's just not sufficient. And we could even see when the government announced the loan program how reluctant banks were to still lend on that basis. So yeah, that's absolutely right, and there's something that we need to do about that. But if we could get this People's Bank, our mutual bank, going, then we can look. If they're not doing it, then let's do it ourselves. And I think, and within 4 or 5 years, within that period, we can be in a position to be able to lend that money to businesses that can't get it from other mainstream main high street lenders. But it's absolutely fundamental. I agree.
Right. Barry, thanks for your time. It's been great to have you in the downtown den this afternoon. Thanks for everybody who's contributed. Thanks for those who have been observing. And just a quick mention of our Regeneration conference, which is taking place at the Belfry in September, national conference. Not many tickets left, so if you do want to come along, please contact Heather as soon as you can to book your tickets. And then she's just reminded me, we've got Ryan Wayne from the Tony Blair Institute next week in the Den, who's got lots of interesting things to say. A Scouser as well, would you believe? We get everywhere. And Ryan is a really interesting guy. But honestly, Barry, it's been an absolute pleasure to see you today, and hopefully, mate, we can get you to a live event in the not too distant future.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks, Barry. Speak soon.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks.